Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. The saying no D&D is better than bad D&D exists for a reason. People often stay in a bad campaign because they either really enjoy a few players at the table or a few characters in the game. The good news is that you're allowed to take those relationships elsewhere. If you've tried your hardest to make a bad situation better, there is a pretty good chance that those other players you like at the table are frustrated too. You're allowed to just leave and start a new game at the same time the very next week. You may end up being stuck as the Dungeon Master yourself, but that in many ways can be a blessing. If the old Dungeon Master had a really good story but really awful table manners, you can take what you liked about their game and find a way to incorporate it into a new campaign. Good storytellers steal all the time from the media that they consume. That random non-player character from the old campaign that you love can just be inserted into your new campaign's world. Today's treasure was submitted at lootgoblinstories@gmail.com, and it goes by the name Fighting Fire with Fire, when that guy turns his players into those guys. To preface this, I 100% know that I'm the a-hole in this situation, and I was incredibly petty in my actions. I should have left the table far earlier and saved everyone the hassle, but I would do it all over again if given the option. Content warning for essay and non-consensual creation of drawn, not safe for work photos. This campaign was a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game using Theater of the Mind over Discord. Our group of 5 players would meet roughly once a week to twice a month due to personal life and work, and everything was going fine for about the first year of being at the table. I made some pretty good friendships among that group. We would hang out on calls after the sessions and talk about what was to come, and would even draw each other's characters. The Dungeon Master would offer to commission our characters as well, but I respectfully declined. It was pretty fun all in all, but unfortunately I was wearing rose-colored glasses. During the course of our campaign, our DM had laid out a pretty engaging story that apparently went from slay the dragon to rescue the princess, to venturing into other realms to save the world. When I joined, the level 15 party consisted of a barbarian, an artificer, a fighter, and a paladin, all of them humans. Fighter is more relevant later in the story, but I will talk about him later. Despite being the only non-human, my character was accepted with only a small amount of unease, mostly due to the fact that he was a lion man in full plate armor found after walking away from a 10v1 battle with bugbears. I asked the DM if I could have a cool introduction, which I know is kinda cringy, but all of us had had one at some point. Within the campaign itself, everyone seemed to click really well, and I was a bit hesitant at first to roleplay in a similar fashion, like doing voices and talking in first person instead of my character says/does. But they brought me out of my shell, even if I struggled a little bit trying to get my character to sound similar to what I had in mind. Romance was also a possibility at the table, with the DM saying that he was fine with romancing NPCs. However, I politely declined as I identified as Arrow Ace, a romantic asexual, and my character was going to reflect that. He said, "Oh, okay," and said he would keep it in mind. Despite this, I was deceived and learned that my DM saw this as romance and sexual themes don't bother me because I don't care. You can see where this is going to go. Okay, so I'm guessing this Dungeon Master did not listen at all. I don't know, maybe he thinks you're one of those anime protagonists that's so nonchalant they just kind of end up with a harem. Let's dive into the story and see. The first domino started to fall after several sessions when the DM developed a running gag where whenever we entered town, at least one NPC would throw themselves at my character, and to put it bluntly, wanted my character to rail them. The first time it happened, I muted my mic and contacted the DM over private messages, so as to not spoil the game for the other 4 players at the moment. When I did, I heard him audibly groan and have them leave. This continued to happen with excuses being thrown out from your character's just really handsome to he/she is possessed and you have to screw them in order to break the spell. In hindsight, I should have left then and there, but at the time I was a mixture of stubborn, a wet blanket, and desperate to play D&D with anyone. I just laughed it off, diffused the situation, and just took the punches as they started to come, as my perverted furry DM slowly chipped away until the incident. Oh god, it's always called the incident. The incident occurred after what felt like the entire population of the DM's world wanting to screw my paladin. The DM decided he would take away my player agency to play out his perverted furry fantasies. The party had just sealed away an ancient evil would-be god from destroying the world, which I can only assume is the manifestation of this DM search history. The DM in the previous session stated that we could select an item and be given 5,000 platinum pieces as a reward, in addition to gaining nobility titles. Everyone had what they wanted picked out, with most of it being either weapons or armor pieces. And I recall I picked a Vorpal longsword as my prize since the DM said nothing was off the table. The party each got what they wanted: a barbarian with a belt of cloud giant strength, a fighter with an anti-magic field armor, an artificer with an animated shield, and paladin with a holy avenger longsword. We were ecstatic when we got them, and immediately were excited to use them at some point. Then the DM said that there would be an extra reward for my character. The DM puts on a big show where the king asks my character to stand before him and kneel. I was confused and asked what was going on, as I could overhear what was sounding like laughing and aggressive typing. Knowing what I know now, it was the four of them private messaging each other over what was about to happen. I do as directed, given my paladin is lawful in alignment, and said that he bows his head in respect. The DM proceeds to describe that he is thoroughly impressed with my character's skill, as I dealt the final blow to the big bad evil guy, and as a reward, the king was going to hand over his daughter for marriage. I was shocked and confused as hell, and just went silent as the DM started to use a high-pitched squeaky voice as she fawned over my paladin. Everyone else, however, was laughing and egging on a reaction. When I hesitated, the DM then described how she kissed him. Don't know how, given he's a Leonin and they don't have lips. Then dragged him away to a room to, yeah. It was rather decent in detail as well, and I just deafened myself while I took in what just happened, feeling sick to my stomach and lying that I had to go early. The DM wasn't finished though. I got a direct message from him that was him going into further detail into how my character was straight up assaulted, and even sent me a drawn image of his princess as a catgirl assaulting my paladin. I left him on red and waited until the DM was offline to join the call and talk to the other players about what happened, and I went from sick to outright angry as they were giggling over the fact I was upset. Even Paladin, someone I would argue was my best friend, ended up telling me I should be grateful I was finally getting some, and could stop hiding behind your fake sexuality, you incel. Yet again, I should have left after this, but stupidly I didn't. I rationalized that I had no one else to play with, and I didn't want to throw away all the hard work and time I spent making friends with those people outside of the game. I didn't want to lose that at the time, so I just raised my shield of tolerance, gritted my teeth, and prayed it wouldn't get any worse. I didn't want to bring down the campaign after all, as we were at the final arc of the campaign, and we just reached level 20. I was wrong. One thing I find sad about this story is how clear it is that they're putting up with the bad situation because there's a fear of not knowing if there's going to be anything better. To anyone that feels like they're in a situation like this, I can guarantee you that there are hundreds of games, if not thousands, that you could join that are better than something like this. It might not be the first group you jump to after this group, but odds are it's not going to be as bad as this. Obviously, this campaign's doomed to fail. Let's see what happens though. I don't know how much longer I endured before I finally snapped and turned into a petty monster, but I was a wet blanket for far too long with the DM and the party walking over me. My character was being used as essentially a sex doll for the princess. The DM was sharing more and more explicit images and was trying to ERP with me. I was exhausted from the constant jokes in and out of game, and my character slowly started becoming a mute and even took a vow of silence. The day I snapped was when I found out that the DM had decided to publish his not safe for work images of my character and his assaulter on his portfolio for commissions. I found out last among the party, with the other members either laughing at me or calling me a pervert and a creep, as the DM had contacted them prior in order to control the narrative. Everyone except for Fighter. He was the person I was most distant from, as he was pretty aloof and kept to himself. He was a good role player and a bit of a rules lawyer, in a good way, as he was less actually, and more helping the game progress smoothly. Whenever the jokes happened, he would make a half comment or just be disengaged a bit before he moved on. So when he initially sent me a message, I was fully expecting him to continue the desperate pervert bit, but I was delightfully wrong. Fighter stated that I wasn't the only one who had been subjected to this, as his character had been harassed by a DMPC until Fighter straight up killed the DMPC and told the DM he would be leaving the campaign if he tried that shit with the Fighter again. We took it to voice call after that and spent a good couple of hours on call on what to do in the future, and we formed a friendship that still lasts to this day. I took my concerns to the DM over my character and the DM's behavior. I was laughed at by DM, Paladin, Barbarian, and Artificer for my problems, and the gauntlet was metaphorically thrown as Fighter had enough of them as well. We wanted revenge in the pettiest way possible. Fighter and I spent days coming up with a plan on how to not just ruin, but outright destroy this campaign. The plan was to play into the DM's fantasy of having my character and his assaulter to be married, as the DM kept hinting at it repeatedly, as if I was playing a Conquest Paladin. Of course, Fighter and I were 2 versus 3, with 2 half-casters and a tank as our opponents. With the campaign being heavy RP, we figured out that a wedding would force them to be rid of their armor and their weapons, leaving only magical items such as rings of protection, bracers of defense, cloaks of displacement, etc. I would be exempt from this, however, due to my character's background being from a very warrior-heavy society, where removing their weapons and armor is like a Mandalorian taking off their helmet. The problem with magic items is where Fighter's anti-magic field armor comes into play, leaving everyone but Barbarian virtually defenseless. The plan was going to be tight and require a lot of luck, but the dice gods had blessed us, and the last session of the campaign was ready. And now I give you the pettiest moment in all of my time playing tabletop role-playing games, and how I destroyed a multi-year campaign. We sit down at the session, and I roleplay asking for the assaulting princess's hand in marriage, and the DM is over the moon. Without hesitation, he was ecstatic, with Barbarian, Paladin, and Artificer laughing at me, while Fighter was sitting quietly in wait. As we hoped, the DM asked us to roleplay my character's bachelor night. Fighter deliberately got himself drunk, so he could not attend the wedding. Everyone else had forgotten that we had been carrying a potion around that would grant us the effects of greater restoration. Since we had lay on hands from 2 paladins, we never needed to use it. The rest of the party got dressed for the wedding, and I clearly stated to the DM that I kept my equipment on my person several times over, so he could not be mad and say that I was cheating. The scene is then set with my character waiting at an altar, while the Fighter had recovered, got in his equipment, and decided to hide in the shadows with a bow at the ready. The DM goes over the scene with himself talking as multiple NPCs, with Fighter claiming he wanted to sneak into the wedding as not to embarrass the party for his over partying. The DM agrees, and so does the rest of the party. The events that unfold goes as follows. DM: after finishing her vows, the princess looks into your Leonin eyes with excitement and lust, eager to hear your reply. Me in character, I place a hand upon her shoulder and go to lean in for a kiss, telling her to close her eyes. DM as the assaulter with their high-pitched squeaky voice:
"Oh, Leonin, I can't wait to have you as the king."
She then closes her eyes and leans in to kiss you as well. Me in character, I unsheath my vorpal sword and cut down the princess before pointing it at the crowd, saying, "Kneel before your new king." Corny line for sure, but I didn't care at the time. I wanted to become the villain of this campaign. The Fighter uses this cue to shoot an arrow at the king, scoring a critical hit and killing him, followed by arguing with the DM that he would also be able to attack the queen due to his extra attack. The other players were equal parts horrified and furious with Fighter, who replaced his bow with his rapier and activated his anti-magic field armor as he ran at them. The DM tried to shut it down, but Barbarian stated he wanted this combat and bullied the DM into allowing it to continue. As he stated that he drew his weapon, Fighter reminded everyone that we were the only 2 who declared they had their weapons and armor, and everyone else came to the wedding unarmed. The party and the DM demanded to know why we were doing this, and I simply told him with the biggest shit-eating grin on my face, it's what my character would do. Everyone at the table was mad at Fighter and I, and combat went just as well as you thought. The Artificer was totaled, the Paladin was overwhelmed, and Barbarian lost his mind when I decapitated him with my vorpal sword. The 3 of them raged at the DM, who seemingly admitted defeat from how he had suddenly gone silent. As expected, I was then kicked from the call and banned from the server, with DM sending me a long slur-riddled rant over how I am the worst player ever and how I should never play TTRPGs ever again, and of course how I ruined his years-long campaign by murdering my character's assaulter and not being flattered by the not safe for work photos he drew of my paladin. The fighter was banned shortly after, as he declared what our plan was and our reasons why. Were we awful in this and should have just left and been better people? Definitely. It was petty, but Fighter and I look back on this as a lesson of the need for clear communication, respect of boundaries, and to not stay at a table when it's just constant torture. If you're not having fun, leave the table, and don't end up becoming a character in a D&D horror story. Thank you again for submitting this story. I know that you mentioned early on that you were being petty, but it was honestly a pretty reasonable crash out. It's really sad to say this isn't the first situation where I had an artist that kept sending not safe for work photos in people's private messages, even after they begged them to stop over and over again. I guess some people just use their artistic abilities for evil. At first I was going to say it was the artist's thinly veiled fetish, but this is pretty overt and broadcasted. You actually did communicate pretty well with the DM. Obviously though, it didn't matter. I always recommend you doing that before you reach out to the rest of the party. So you did that right, then you tried talking to the people you knew in the party. Unfortunately, that didn't work as well. Whenever a really bad dungeon master crashes out in these stories, I never really feel bad for them. As a story beat, I don't even think it's that weird that the person that slayed the big bad evil guy gets to marry the princess. Obviously though, at this table, romance always had to be at the expense of someone. There are tables where romance can be a plot point and a satisfying one. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to submit your stories to lootgoblinstories@gmail.com. Make sure to like and hype the video, and subscribe if you haven't become a member already. I hope that the fighter and the author here aren't turned off from playing the game. It's always sad to see stories like this, and as always, I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now. Hey kid, want to try some gamer subs? You can now get free samples anywhere in the world and try the most delicious 0-calorie energy powder in the game when you use code LootGoblin. Each sample sent out gets me one step closer to my quest to get a flavor that tastes suspiciously like Dr. Pepper. If you end up liking those free samples and want to purchase some gamer subs, make sure to use the link in the description or use my code to get 10% off your entire order.